I've had a lot of conversations with parents who are trying to figure out what education avenue they want to take with their kids, with founders and entrepreneurs who are building new schools, with students who are coming out of alternative programs, with investors who are backing different projects. I found a lot of commonalities in the questions that people ask, but I've also gathered my thoughts about what I think are the most important things for people to bear in mind as they're thinking about an educational path. And a lot of the things that I think people don't always question enough, or don't always take all the way to first principles when maybe they should. And that's what I want to talk about next. The most important pieces of advice that I would give parents on how to think about the schooling of their children. The first one is that we stress out way too much about college. Everybody told me that I was ruining my life by not going to college. And yet, by the time I was 22 and I would have been graduating from college, I was already working at a well-paying startup job. I had a positive network. I had years of experience under my belt. And I realized that most of what people had told me about college wasn't true. Once you start working, people start caring about your resume, not your degree. They care about your past experience and what you've accomplished in those experiences, not about where you went to school. Unless you're a doctor or a lawyer or something that legally requires a degree in order to practice your profession, you don't actually need one. And most jobs that say a degree is required don't actually require a degree to complete the job. They're using the degree requirement as a proxy for competence, and they're using it as a filtration mechanism in their application process. They're screening out people who don't have degrees because it's just a bare minimum thing that they can sift for to make their processing through applicants easier. But they don't actually care. And you can get around that by having a portfolio of skills and projects that you've completed that shows your ability to do the job well. And by creatively pitching a company as part of your application, instead of just going through the conveyor belt application process where your resume gets sifted out because you don't have a degree. Most people aren't creative with their applications to jobs, but if you are, the last thing people care about is where you went to school. And everything that people say college has a monopoly on and that you need a college experience for is not true. You can get what you'd get at a good college outside of school too. I did. You can use Twitter for networking to meet people who are interesting professionals in different spaces that you're interested in. If you move to a city with interesting people or just visit a city with interesting people, you can start to build a network of individuals who work in the profession you're interested in and can help you and support you and give you advice and offer you opportunities. If you go to conferences, you can meet people who have expertise in the areas that you're interested in. If you build a portfolio of projects you've completed, you can use that for employability in place of a degree. And everybody knows that college does not have a monopoly on the actual information. They give it away for free. You can go watch MIT lectures, Yale lectures, the entire curriculum of Harvard for free on their websites. They're giving it away. The value is not the education. The value is the network. It's the opportunities. It's the experience. It's the career readiness. And all of those things can be gotten elsewhere for a fraction of the price of college. The second thing that I would tell parents, and I think this is really important, school as we know it is an outdated idea. Prior to the 21st century, schools needed to be brick and mortar buildings because knowledge was geographically constrained. We didn't have the internet. We couldn't go with a few strokes of a keyboard, find everything written on a topic in the history of mankind. You had to go somewhere to get knowledge. You had to go to a university. You had to go to a school. And bigger schools were valuable because you had access to more. A public school or a consolidated school district had more resources, more teachers, more books, more access to information than a small, localized one-room schoolhouse did. It was an innovation on the old model. But the internet has changed that. You can access all knowledge from anywhere more than you ever could inside of an institution, which means that the informational monopoly that schools used to be built on no longer exists. Now school is about socialization. It's about accountability. It's about structure. It's about childcare. Those are the things that it's delivering on. Education's kind of at the bottom of the list. And all of those things can be done better elsewhere. It's worth thinking about unbundling the services that school provides, even if you're not in a position where you're ready to act on that. Chris Turner, who I had on the show a couple of months ago, is doing a great job of this in Atlanta. He's building a co-learning space for kids called Moonrise. Think of a WeWork or a co-working space, but designed for kids, especially homeschooling kids who can come into the space and work and learn and play together or work independently on their school that they brought from home. It's not a space that has teachers. It's not a space that's designed to deliver an education. It's just solving the childcare and socialization problems of school. People are doing this with online school where they're not addressing the childcare and socialization components, but they're delivering a world-class education to kids no matter where they're geographically located. There are lots of different people who are tackling the education problem from different angles, and the internet is making that possible because you no longer need school to fill all of these functions at once. We live in a world where the only thing we know in living memory is kids going to public school. It's what our parents did. It's what our grandparents did. We assume that that's how it has to be because that's all we can remember. But public school is a 19th and 20th century invention. It's not how we've educated our children for most of human history. And in the 21st century, in the era of the internet, it's no longer the most effective way to do it, and it's no longer necessary. The third thing I would tell parents is to teach your kids how to learn. In the era of the internet, not only is access to information different, but careers are different. The world is changing very, very rapidly, and it's going to change even more quickly as things progress. The advent of AI means that the entire career landscape is going to change. The work that I do now as a podcast host, as someone who runs a marketing agency that does social media brand building for clients, those things didn't exist when I was a little kid. I couldn't have been in kindergarten and said, I want to be a podcaster when I grow up. This career hadn't been invented yet. And now that AI exists, careers are going to change even faster. There is no way that you can prepare your child for all of the possible future careers that they're going to encounter, but you can teach them how to be agile. You can teach them how to learn things quickly. And you can teach them how to take advantage of the fact that they have access to more information at their fingertips than most people for the history of the world could have accessed in their entire lifetimes. And they can learn anything that they want. And so your job as a parent or your job as an educator is to teach them how to learn so they can take advantage of this huge wealth of information that they have and translate it to the huge wealth of opportunity that now exists via the internet for possible career paths that your child can take. The fourth thing I would tell parents is don't stress out about grades. I've shared some posts on Twitter over the past few months about the phenomenon of grade inflation and comparing rising grades to falling test scores as an indicator that grades don't actually matter. They're kind of an arbitrary and made up structure. But more importantly, nobody cares about your child's report card or their permanent record that school administrators like to scare them with. Good test scores, but poor learning ethic is far more detrimental to your child's future than having poor test scores, but good learning ethic. When your child is in school, they're taught to the test. They're taught things that they're going to need to know in order to get good grades, score well on tests. Often these are things that they're not yet ready to learn or that they're not yet interested in. And over time, this can lead to a real feeling of apathy around learning that's caused by coercive learning structures. This can kill children's innate desire to learn, and it often does. If you observe small children who always ask why and who are always excited to learn something new, you compare them to older students, middle schoolers, high schoolers who are deeply apathetic about learning new things. That's not actually a normal developmental arc. That's a shift that occurs in a child after years of being coercively taught things that they didn't want to know and they didn't see a purpose for. If your child develops a strong learning ethic, a strong desire to learn new things, that is infinitely more important to their long-term success than a report card that no one is going to care about 10 years down the road. I've interviewed Matt Bateman, one of the co-founders of Guidepost Montessori, a couple of times on the podcast. And he talks about the fact that most of K-12 education is preparation for the junior and senior year. And the junior and the senior year are important because that's when a student gets into college. And your college acceptance is the most important thing in a child's entire education in the eyes of the establishment. If your child gets into a prestigious school and drops out, that's considered to be better than your child getting into a very average school and graduating. And that's infinitely better than your child not getting into school at all. And so everything in K-12 education is built around making sure that a child does well on their college applications. And that leads parents to stress out about grades. But don't stress out about grades. They're not nearly as important you think, and it's not worth killing your child's love of learning in the process. The fifth thing I would tell parents is don't force kids to learn things when they're not ready. My little sister, who is 6 years younger than me, did not want to learn how to read. She hated it. My mom taught her phonics. She taught her the alphabet. She taught her how to sound out words. My sister could read basic words, but she hated it. And she fought my mom tooth and nail to sit down and actually read books. And my mom let her. My sister was in first grade. She was in second grade. She didn't want to read. And my mom didn't force her until my sister was 8 years old. And my mom finally said, okay, like it's time. My sister was showing signs of being ready. She was showing more interest in books. And my mom said, okay, let's sit down every day for the month of February. It's the shortest month of the year. And let's read a short book every day. It can be a picture book. It can be something really simple, but every day we're going to read something. And by the end of the month of February, my sister was reading at an above grade level. She was reading beyond my mom's sitting down with her and reading books every day. And to this day, my little sister is an avid reader. She reads more than I do, and I love to read. She is constantly checking books out of the library, going to bookstores and purchasing books. Every time I talk to her, she's reading something new. And I attribute a lot of that to the fact that my mom didn't force her to read before she was ready. When I was in elementary school, I didn't want to do math. And my parents were early in their homeschooling process, and they made me do math because that's what you're supposed to do. And so every day I would have to sit down and complete a worksheet. and hated it. And to this day, I can't stand math. I have to do math as a business owner, and I hate it. And I know from doing SAT prep when I was in high school that I'm actually not bad at math, and I kind of like the puzzle of it. But because learning math coercively early on as a child was such a painful experience to me, I feel a huge resentment towards having to do any math at all. And I attribute that to having a coercive experience with it when I was in elementary school. If your kids aren't ready to learn something, don't force it. They'll be ready eventually when their own natural curiosity is piqued, or when they have an application that makes them interested in learning a skill. And they will be much better served from having that experience as opposed to being forced to learn something that they weren't yet ready for. The sixth thing I would tell parents is to embrace efficiency. Most homeschooling families know that school only takes a couple of hours a day. It does not take 7 to 8 hours a day unless the schooling model is optimized for childcare, or unless you're delivering education on such a mass model that you have to waste most of a child's time in order to make sure that you're meeting every child's needs. School does not have to take a long time. It does not mean you're doing it wrong if it only takes a couple hours a day. Embrace that. Seek to be as efficient as possible so that your kids can have as much time as possible to be kids, to have a childhood, to be playing, to be exploring, to be doing creative work, which most likely in the long run will be far more important for their development and the formation of their character and for paving the path to their future than any of the academics they're going to be engaging with. The academics are important too, but the free play and free exploration that they have time for will likely be infinitely more so. The seventh thing I would tell parents is that a liberal arts education is still a worthy endeavor. There is a lot of conversation in the education space around what should and shouldn't still be in a curriculum. A lot of models are very focused on skill building. A lot of models are very focused on project-based learning. There's a big conversation around the importance of life skills and their superiority to learning abstract concepts that you're never going to use in your day-to-day life. A liberal arts education won't teach you job skills. It won't make you career ready. Anyone who tells you, oh, just go to college, get a liberal arts degree, and then go land a job, that being painted as a straight path is a lie. That's not true. But a liberal arts education will teach you how to be a human, which is arguably your most important work in life. It will teach you how to think. It will give you context on how to think, on how the world around you is structured and how it has evolved over time and how it will continue to evolve into the future. And all of those things are really important to understand if you want to have a hand in its evolution, if you want to be an active player in it. With all of the technology that we now have access to, it's very easy to be lazy about thinking. It's very easy to be lazy about doing the hard work of pondering what it means to be a human and to do it well. And a liberal arts education is in some ways the best inoculation against that. It's the best preparation a child can have to maintain their sense of wonder and excitement and enthusiasm about the world around them. Studying like true academic ideas is still important. It is still a worthy endeavor, and it is still worthy of being infused into a curriculum. That being said, the next thing I would tell parents is that at the same time, more things are education than you think. And school has taught us to segment out academic subjects as being school and everything else is other life stuff. And when you're thinking about your work as being the formation of a child, you're thinking about your work as being the stewarding and the nurturing of a child all the way to adulthood and helping them prepare for success as an adult. There are a lot of things that go into their education and their preparation for that. Your child needs to learn life skills, things like shopping, banking, finance, taxes, the ins and outs of business. They need to learn home skills, things like cooking and cleaning. And they also need to learn social skills, things like emotional intelligence, networking, managing and maintaining relationships, navigating the really uncomfortable things that come up when multiple people interact with each other. And all of those things are incredibly important for their life success. And all of those things need to be factored into an education. It's not always the job of a school to deliver those things, but as a parent, these things are just as much your responsibility as their academic learnings. This is a very big point of debate in the alternative school world. Different people have very strong philosophies around what should be delivered in an education. Is it the job of the school to teach things like life skills? Is it the job of the school to teach social skills? Or does that default back to the parent? And at the end of the day, I don't know that there is a singular right answer to that question. But I do think that as a parent, as you're thinking about all of the areas that you want to make sure you're preparing your child for their future, all of these things are equally as important to their success as academics. Not more important, but equally important. The next thing I would tell parents is that you need to give your child as much agency as possible in their education. Self-direction is such an important skill. And it's one of the things I'm most grateful for to my parents for giving me. When I was in high school, I had almost complete self-direction over my education. But when I was in elementary school, I had most of my day to be self-directed. I could choose whether I was going to read or do art or write a story or play outside. And having large swaths of space where I got to be the person deciding what I was going to do was super important. I learned how to be comfortable being bored and use boredom as a springboard into creativity and new ideas and endeavors. I learned how to have a whole afternoon to myself and figure out what I was going to do with it. But I also learned how to follow my interests over time and iteratively work on projects and do things that often kids coming out of high school and going into college struggle with, because they've spent their entire lives having everything planned for them, what they were going to do in their school day, what sport they were going to do after. Everything was always covered for them. And they go to college and you hear college professors talk about how much kids can struggle in their freshman year because they've never had to be self-directed before. Give your children the gift of agency. Give them as much self-direction as possible. If they never learn how to be their own captain and to follow their own compass, they're going to spend their entire lives looking for other people to tell them which direction to move in and what to do next. And they're never going to be able to live a life that's structured around the things that are most important to them because they never will have learned how. Give your kids as much self-direction as possible in their education, even at the expense of everything being done perfectly every time, because in the long run, their ability to self-direct is infinitely more important to their development. The next thing I would tell parents is that socialization, as we worry about it, is overrated. Learning how to interact with other kids, with other adults is an important life skill. But the way we do it inside of public school is very artificial and very strange. When a child is in school, they learn how to interact with other students at their grade level, often at their aptitude level. And they learn how to interact with adults only as authority figures to be respected and obeyed. Most homeschoolers that I have met over the years, and most students at truly alternative models of school, are far more adept at interacting with kids of disparate grade levels, with other adults, because to them, that's just normal. A homeschool kid goes to a homeschool co-op and interacts with kids of all different grade levels. They interact with older siblings, younger siblings, parents, grandparents. When they go to the store, they're interacting with the cashier. When they go to the bank, they interact with the clerk. They're learning how to interact with people at differing levels and in different arenas in life in a way that's necessary for real life, but in a way that kids at school rarely get a chance to do because they're in the classroom all day. Much of what we're worried about with socializing our kids isn't true. We worry about our little kids being socialized, but when kids are small, they do a thing called parallel play. They don't even actually play with each other. They play alongside each other. And they do better work when they work alongside each other. Montessori education spends a lot of time focused on this. If you walk into a Montessori classroom for kids ages 2 through 6, you'll see that the small kids are all working independently. They're all set up around the classroom, doing their own work alone and super focused on something without interacting with their peers. As kids get older, they need socialization more. They're more developmentally ready to work on group projects. But even then, they don't need to be working with other kids at their same grade level in order to be getting the socialization that they need in order to learn how to interact with each other. And in school, kids are also subjected to bullying. They're subjected to peer pressure, often at the expense of being comfortable being their own selves. They're trying to do what they need to do to fit in, often at the expense of their own sincere interests and their own sincere development of themselves. If your child's on an unusual education path, don't worry about socialization in a traditional sense. And honestly, if your child is in a more traditional school, I would probably still recommend broader socialization beyond just the classroom, meeting other people out in the real world besides their peer group, because those interpersonal skills are going to be incredibly valuable on their life path.